"I didn't invite you," my daughter-in-law said calmly, standing in the dining room of the house I built, beside the table I bought with overtime pay and sleepless nights. Her voice wasn't loud, that's what made it cut deeper. Calm, controlled, as if I were a stranger who had wandered in unannounced instead of the man who poured the foundation under her feet. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. I looked around the room slowly. The chandelier above us, I installed it myself the winter my son turned 10. The wallpaper, my late wife had chosen the pattern, tiny blue flowers that she said made the room feel alive. The long oak table between us still had the faint scratch marks from when my son used to do his homework there, pressing too hard with his pencils. Every corner of that room held a memory that belonged to me. Yet there I stood, feeling like a guest who had overstayed his welcome. "I live here," I said quietly. Not angry. Not yet. Just stating a fact, the way you would remind someone of the obvious. She folded her arms, still composed. "You used to," she replied. "Things are different now." Different. That word echoed in my head. Different since my son got married. Different since laughter in the house started sounding forced when I entered the room. Different since decisions about family matters happened behind closed doors that never used to be closed to me. I glanced toward the kitchen. I could hear plates clinking, voices murmuring, her parents, her sister, people I had no quarrel with, people eating at my table while I stood uninvited in my own doorway. "I was told there was a family dinner," I said. "There is," she answered. "My family." My chest tightened, but I kept my face steady. Age teaches you how to hold storms inside your ribs without letting them reach your eyes. "And I'm what?" I asked. "A tenant? A visitor?" She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me with that same calm expression, the kind you use when you believe you're justified. My son finally stepped into the dining room then. He had heard. Of course he had heard. He looked from her to me, already tired, already wanting peace more than truth. "Dad, maybe just for tonight, just for tonight." I almost smiled at that, because just for tonight is how erasure begins. One dinner, one holiday, one decision at a time, until your name fades from the walls you raised. I pulled out one of the chairs slowly and ran my hand along its backrest. I remembered buying the set secondhand because brand new was too expensive. I remembered sanding the wood myself to make it smooth enough that my wife wouldn't catch her sweater on splinters. "I built this house," I said, not to argue, but because the sentence deserved to exist in the air. No one spoke. "I carried your husband in my arms when he had a fever at 3 in the morning, I continued, looking at her now. "I buried his mother. I paid every bill these walls have ever known. And today, I need an invitation to sit at my own table?" Her calm cracked for the first time, just slightly. "This is my home now too," she said. "We need space, boundaries." Boundaries, another modern word that sounded clean, but felt like a locked door. I nodded slowly, not because I agreed, but because I understood something in that moment that I hadn't allowed myself to see before. Ownership changes quietly, not on paper. On paper, the deed still had my name, but emotionally, culturally, generationally, the house had already been handed over. I looked at my son again. He couldn't meet my eyes. That hurt more than her words, because disrespect from a stranger is an insult. Silence from your own blood is a verdict. I pushed the chair back in gently. "You're right," I said. Both of them looked surprised. "You didn't invite me," I continued. "And maybe that's the problem. Somewhere along the way, I started waiting for invitations in a house where I once made all the welcomes." I walked toward the hallway, my footsteps slow, measured, dignified, not the steps of a man thrown out, but of one who finally understood his place had changed. At the doorway, I paused. Without turning around, I said, "Just remember one thing. Tables aren't important because of who buys them. They're important because of who they make room for. Then I went to my room, closed the door softly, and for the first time since building that house, I felt like I was living in someone else's home. Short story BNA Dihai 15 minutes ka impactful story lik do. I didn't hear the words at first. Not because she said them quietly, but because my mind refused to accept them. I didn't invite you, my daughter-in-law said calmly. The sentence floated across the dining room like dust in sunlight, soft, weightless, until it settled on my chest like stone. I stood there near the doorway, one hand still resting on the wall I had painted myself 27 years ago. The smell of food filled the house: roasted chicken, cumin rice, fresh bread, the kind of meal that used to mean laughter, noise, family. Now it felt like I had walked into the wrong house. I looked at her, waiting for the rest of the sentence, waiting for the smile that would tell me it was a joke. It never came. Behind her, my dining table was fully set: plates, glasses, cloth napkins folded the way my late wife used to fold them on special occasions. But the faces sitting there, they weren't mine. Her parents, her sister, her brother-in-law, guests, eating at the table I bought with money earned from double shifts and night work. I live here, I said, my voice slower than usual, like each word had to push through mud. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't look angry. That calmness hurt the most. You used to, she replied. Now we need boundaries. Boundaries. I repeated the word silently, trying to understand how it had found its way into my home, a home that was built on sacrifice, not boundaries. My son walked in then, drawn by the silence. He looked at me, then at her. I saw the conflict in his eyes, but I also saw hesitation, calculation, fear of choosing discomfort. Dad, maybe just for tonight, he said gently, just for tonight. I smiled faintly, not because it was funny, but because I understood what he didn't. Respect is never taken all at once. It is removed in installments. One, just for tonight. One, maybe next time. One, you wouldn't understand. Until one day you are standing in your own house, waiting to be invited. I stepped closer to the table. My fingers brushed the back of a chair. The wood was smooth where years of hands had polished it. I remembered buying this set second-hand because new furniture was too expensive back then. I remembered sanding each chair in the garage so my wife wouldn't get splinters. I remembered my son doing homework here, crying when math got too hard, laughing when his mother bribed him with sweets. Memories sat at that table more permanently than any guest ever could. I built this house, I said quietly. No one spoke. The clinking of plates from the kitchen had stopped. Even the air felt like it was listening. I poured the foundation with my own hands, I continued. I worked nights so my family could sleep safely inside these walls. I buried my wife. In the same year I finished paying the last loan on this place. My voice didn't rise. Pain doesn't always shout. Sometimes it speaks in steady sentences. And today, I said, looking at her, I need an invitation to eat at my own table. Her calm expression wavered slightly, but she held her ground. This is my home too, she said. When we got married, things changed. We need space, privacy. We can't always include everyone. Everyone? I almost asked who everyone was, because it sounded like I had been moved into that category. My son stepped forward. Dad, don't make this a big deal. Don't make this a big deal. I looked at him carefully. The boy I once carried on my shoulders so he could see parades above the crowd. The child whose school fees I paid before buying myself new shoes. Now he couldn't look me in the eye. That hurt more than her words. Because strangers can disrespect you, but your children, they validate or erase you. I pulled out a chair slowly and sat down, not to eat, just to feel the wood beneath me one more time. The table felt colder than I remembered. You know, I said softly, when your mother was alive, this table never needed invitations. If someone was hungry, they sat. If someone was sad, they talked. That's what made it a family table. No one answered. Her father cleared his throat awkwardly, clearly wishing to disappear. I stood again. "You're right," I said. All three of them looked surprised. "You didn't invite me, and maybe that's because I stopped inviting myself into my own son's life long ago, out of respect. I didn't want to interfere. I thought giving you space meant you'd give me place." My son looked up then, guilt finally surfacing. But guilt after damage is like rain after harvest. Too late to grow anything. I walked toward the hallway. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because of age, but because of realization. At my bedroom door, I paused. Without turning around, I said, "Just remember, houses don't stay homes by ownership papers. They stay homes by inclusion." I closed the door quietly. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the framed photograph on the dresser, me, my wife, and our son, on the day we moved into this house. We looked younger than hope itself. I traced her face with my finger. "You see this?" I whispered to the photo. "We built it right, didn't we?" Silence answered, but memory spoke. Her laughter in the kitchen, her voice calling us to dinner, her rule that no one ate until everyone was seated. No invitations needed. Family was automatic. Days passed. Something had shifted permanently. No one said it aloud, but I felt it. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Plans happened without me. One evening, I opened the fridge and saw labeled containers. For guests. For tomorrow. Don't use. Don't use. In my own kitchen. I closed the door gently. Not angry. Just finished. A week later, I called my son to the living room. He looked nervous before I even spoke. "Sit," I said. He obeyed like he used to as a child, but now the obedience came from discomfort, not respect. "I've been thinking," I began. He braced himself for accusation. Instead, I handed him a folder. "What's this?" he asked. "The house papers." His eyes widened. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because legally, emotionally, practically, it's already yours." He shook his head quickly. "Dad, no, that's not what I want." I smiled faintly. "It may not be what you want, but it's how you've been living." Silence filled the room. "I'm not angry," I continued. "I'm just aware. There's a difference." He looked down, ashamed. "I've rented a small place nearby," I said. "I'll move next week." His head snapped up. "You're leaving?" "I'm relocating my dignity," I replied gently. "It deserves space too." Tears filled his eyes then, the same eyes that once cried when I left him at school gates. But adulthood had made him late with emotions. "You don't have to go," he said. I nodded. "You're right, I don't have to. That's why I am. Choice carries more dignity than eviction." Moving day came quietly. No drama, no shouting, just boxes, memories, and measured breathing. As I carried the last suitcase to the door, my daughter-in-law stood there. For the first time, she didn't look calm. She looked unsure. "You didn't have to leave," she said softly. I met her eyes, not with anger, but clarity. "You didn't invite me to stay either." Her gaze dropped. I adjusted my coat and stepped outside, but before walking away I turned back toward the house. Sunlight hit the windows the way it used to when my wife watered the plants inside. For a second, I saw our old life reflected in the glass. Then it faded. I spoke one last sentence. Not bitter, not loud, just true. "Take care of the table," I said. "It remembers kindness, and it remembers exclusion." Then I walked to my car. Months passed. My new apartment was small, but peaceful. No labeled food, no close conversations. Sometimes loneliness visited, but it was honest loneliness, not the kind you feel surrounded by people who treat you like furniture. One Sunday evening, there was a knock on my door. I opened it. My son stood there, holding the old dining chair, the one I used to sit in. His eyes were red. "We had dinner tonight," he said. It didn't feel like family. I didn't speak. He swallowed hard. She said, "The table feels different without you." I looked at the chair, then at him. He finally said the words he should have said that night. "Come home, Dad, not as a guest, as the reason the house exists." I studied his face. Remorse had finally matured into understanding. I stepped aside and let him bring the chair in. "Sit," I said. We ate takeout food on my small coffee table that night, and somehow it felt more like family than the grand dinners in that big house ever had, because this time, no invitation was needed.